The car whizzed by like a rogue comet, cutting me off just as I was about to switch lanes. My pulse spiked, and I instinctively muttered, "Idiot!" under my breath, gripping the steering wheel tightly. I glanced over, ready to fire a disapproving glare, but the moment my eyes locked on the car, my anger was replaced by bewilderment. It was her, my wife Annie, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. She waved enthusiastically, the sunlight catching her wedding ring as if the universe was emphasizing the bond we shared. But I didn't wave back. Instead, I stared blankly, my mind still processing the near-miss accident I had envisioned a split second earlier. The freeway isn't the place for love taps or cute gestures, especially when you're trying to merge and avoid becoming roadkill. So, I did what any sensible, irritated commuter would do. I turned my gaze back to the road and focused on making my exit. When I reached the office, I saw her message pop up on my phone. Asterisk, sad you didn't wave back. Sad face. Asterisk. It was so unlike her to express her feelings through a sad emoji that I chuckled, assuming she was joking. I fired off a quick response, something dismissive like, busy focusing on not dying LOL, and buried myself in work. That evening, however, the chuckle faded. Annie was quiet during dinner, stirring her spaghetti with a distracted air. Finally, she looked up, her voice carrying an edge I wasn't accustomed to. "Why didn't you wave back this morning? You looked mad." "It's not that I was mad," I replied. "But come on, Annie. You sped up and nearly blocked my exit. I could have missed it, or worse, gotten into an accident." Her fork hit the plate with a soft clang. "I was trying to say hi," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Do you know how rare it is that we cross paths during our commutes?" I thought it was sweet. And just like that, I realized I'd screwed up. Her voice carried layers of hurt, a sense of rejection that I hadn't accounted for in my morning rush to justify my irritation. "I wasn't mad at you," I said cautiously. "I was just surprised. And yeah, maybe a little annoyed, but not at you. It was just bad timing." "Bad timing? Waving at your wife is bad timing now?" Her eyes narrowed. "You know, it's not about the wave. It's about the fact that you didn't even acknowledge me. You could have smiled. Something. But no, you looked like I was just another car in your way." I sighed, running a hand through my hair, wishing I could rewind the day and approach the moment differently. "You know I love seeing you," I started, but she cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Really? Because you sure didn't act like it. It's not about you being distracted or even annoyed. It's the fact that I tried to connect with you, and you just ignored it. Twice. The morning wave and the text message. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. In my quest to be practical and efficient, I'd ignored the emotional weight of her gestures. Annie wasn't just saying hello. She was making a bid for connection, and I dismissed it like it was background noise. "I'm sorry," I said finally, genuinely. "I didn't think about it that way. I was so caught up in driving, I guess, and trying to get to work. But you're right. I could have at least smiled or said something more thoughtful in my message." Her expression softened slightly, but she still looked wary. "It's not that I need you to be happy every second of the day," she said. "But sometimes I just need to feel like you like me, that you enjoy the little moments we share, even if they're stupid and spontaneous." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "I do like you," I said with a small smile. "A lot, actually. And I love those moments, even when they catch me off guard." Annie laughed, a quiet, tentative sound that felt like the first ray of sun after a storm. "Good," she said, "because next time I see you on the freeway, I might honk instead." "Just don't block my exit," I joked, and she rolled her eyes, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The tension broke, but the lesson lingered. It wasn't just about waving or not waving. It was about recognizing the small, meaningful ways we try to connect with each other. Annie and I had plenty of big gestures, anniversary trips, heartfelt letters, but it was these fleeting moments that reminded us why we worked. The next morning, as I merged onto the freeway, I found myself scanning the cars around me, half expecting to see her Honda speeding by with another grin and wave. When it didn't come, I felt an odd pang of disappointment. funny how one missed connection could make you realize how much you cherished them. That night, I brought her favorite wine home. No special occasion, just a quiet acknowledgement of what we'd shared, and what I'd almost overlooked. The October air clung with a crispness that hinted at the season's change, though inside the aged ballroom of the Victorian manor, it was warmth and flickering candlelight that ruled. The smell of beeswax, dry autumn leaves, and faint whiffs of cinnamon swirled together in an intoxicating blend, setting the stage for a wedding unlike any other. 2 years of meticulous planning had brought us to this night. 2 years of waiting lists, late-night Pinterest boards, and endless phone calls. And yet, in the final stretch, the fault lines of family drama had cracked wide open. Just satanic nonsense, my grandmother had hissed the last time I saw her, face scrunched like she'd bitten into an unripe persimmon. My mother, beside her, nodded fervently, their disapproval feeding off each other like storm clouds darkening the horizon. I'd almost expected lightning to flash behind them. I remembered standing there, wedding binder clutched in my hands, wondering when a woman's wedding had become an open season for unsolicited opinions. No one had balked at Cousin Lindsay's beachside, barefoot chic fiasco where Uncle Steve tripped into the ocean after 2 mini tequila shots. But somehow, my Halloween-themed wedding, a celebration drenched in rich purples, blacks, and bone white, was where they drew the line. I thought they were joking at first. Satanic? I'd echoed, glancing at the delicate sketches of skeleton leaves and cobweb lace on my dress design. I'm sorry, did Tim Burton offend the church somehow? My attempt at humor was met with stony silence. Then came the ultimatum, change it, or we're not coming. The words lingered for days, echoing in my mind as I sat under the dim light of my desk lamp, staring at my guest list. Change it? The idea festered like a splinter under my skin. I'd waited 2 years for this venue, endured hours of stress to turn my dream into reality. And for what? To trade my vision for a safe, pastel-palette wedding that wouldn't upset their fragile sensibilities? By week's end, their camp had grown. Aunt Lila, Cousin Tracy, and a handful of others chimed in their displeasure. The complaints were identical. It's disrespectful. It's offensive. What will people think? They didn't know I'd already run out of patience for the people-pleasing game. The evening I uninvited them, there was no fanfare or dramatic confrontation. Just the steady click of my keyboard as I drafted new invitations and QR codes. The morning after, I sent out a cheerful group text, thanking the detractors for their input and letting them know they no longer needed to worry about attending. Predictably, my phone exploded with outrage. How dare you? Aunt Lila's message screamed in all caps. I booked time off work for this. Another relative texted about the money they'd spent on gifts. My mother called, voice shaking with fury. I let her voicemails pile up without a response. The thing about boundaries is that once you set them, people reveal exactly where they stand. And as each message rolled in, it became clear I'd done the right thing. It wasn't about Halloween or skeletons, or even the faintly gothic venue I'd chosen. It was about control, about them forcing me to play by their rules. 6 weeks later, as I stood in front of a full-length mirror, tugging at the intricate layers of my custom-designed gown, the weight of their absence hit me, but only briefly. The dress, inspired by Emily from Corpse Bride, was a masterpiece of sheer layers, delicate embroidery, and a soft blue hue that glimmered under the lights. My maid of honor, Tasha, adjusted my veil, her reflection beaming in the mirror beside me. "You look like something out of a fairy tale," she said. The guests arrived in a flurry of costume-clad excitement. Witches, vampires, and masquerade ball gowns filled the room, blending seamlessly with the decor. Chandeliers draped in faux spiderweb sparkled, casting intricate shadows across the guests' faces. Jack-o'-lanterns lined the aisles, their carved grins glowing warmly. And the music, a mix of ethereal strings and modern twists on classic Halloween themes, hummed in the background. When the ceremony began, I didn't think about the 25 empty seats or the relatives grumbling back home. I didn't think about my aunt's parting jab about how people were allowed to disagree. Instead, I thought about Mark, standing at the altar with a crooked smile that made my heart feel like a hummingbird in my chest. His suit, black with subtle purple accents, perfectly complemented the aesthetic we'd envisioned together. We wrote our vows in secret, unveiling them that night under the eyes of friends who truly supported us. "You're the one I'd choose in every lifetime," Mark began, his voice steady but warm with emotion. "My vows were less poetic, but no less sincere. I promise to love you, even when you leave socks in the living room." Laughter rippled through the crowd, blending with the sounds of sniffles and claps. When the party kicked off, it was everything I dreamed of. Guests sipped spiced cocktails from cauldrons and danced under a canopy of glittering lights and faux cobwebs. A magician worked his tricks, and children darted around in miniature costumes, giggling. Tasha had hired a surprise fire dancer who drew cheers and gasps from the crowd. There was no drama, no judgment, just joy and the kind of shared experience that left people buzzing with warmth even as the evening grew cold. By the end of the night, as Mark and I shared our final dance, I knew the choices I'd made were worth it. The absence of those who sought to control me was no longer a void. It was a blessing, a reminder that a wedding wasn't about pleasing others. It was about starting a life surrounded by those who cherished us for who we were. The night ended with sparklers lining the path to our getaway car. As Mark opened the door for me, I glanced back at the manor one last time. Its dark windows and stone facade looked almost alive under the moonlight, a place steeped in magic and memory. I smiled, knowing I wouldn't have changed a thing. It started with Max limping into the living room, his once joyful prance reduced to a hesitant shuffle. Max, my 8-year-old golden retriever, my shadow, my partner in chaos, wasn't himself. His tail wagged weakly when I called his name, but his eyes, those bright, eager eyes, looked tired, almost defeated. I called my sister, Paige, immediately. Max was as much hers as mine, even if I was technically the one who had brought him home as a squirmy puppy all those years ago. Paige arrived within minutes, kneeling on the carpet beside Max. "It's his leg," she murmured, running her hands gently along his side. "It has to be." We both agreed to take him to the vet first thing the next morning, though neither of us slept much that night. The news came quickly but hit hard. Max had a torn ACL, and the vet explained it with the kind of calm you wish felt less rehearsed. Surgery was an option, a complicated and costly one, but it would give Max a real shot at recovery. Without it, his mobility would be permanently compromised, and the pain would grow worse over time. Paige and I sat in silence as the vet went over the post-op care. A grueling process of restricted movement, physical therapy, and months of vigilance. In the car on the way home, the tension was almost as palpable as my anxiety. Paige finally broke the silence. "Do you think it's the right thing? I mean, for him?" I glanced at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Of course it's the right thing. He's in pain. This will fix it. But will it? Or will it just make things worse for him? He's not young anymore, and the recovery process," she hesitated. "It sounds brutal." Her words stung, not because I thought she was wrong, but because I'd been trying so hard not to consider that possibility. "You think we should just let him stay like this?" "Paige, he can barely walk." "I'm not saying that," she said quickly, looking at Max in the back seat, his head resting on his paws. I think we need to be sure. This isn't about us wanting him to live forever. It's about what's fair to him." Back at home, we sat at the kitchen table while Max napped nearby, oblivious to the debate raging around him. I laid out the financial aspect first, hoping that logic would carry the day. "I can handle the cost. It's not going to bankrupt me." "It's not just the money," Paige said, exasperated. "Think about how hard it's going to be for him. He'll have to be confined to a crate, probably for weeks. No running, no jumping, no playing, and physical therapy? You know how much he hates being poked and prodded. Do you really think he'll understand why we're putting him through all that?" "Yes, I do," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Because he'll feel better eventually. He'll be able to run again, Paige. You've seen him at the park. That's his favorite thing in the world. And what if it doesn't work?" she shot back. "What if he doesn't recover the way we hope? Or what if something goes wrong during the surgery? We're talking about an invasive procedure on an older dog. It's not a guarantee." I looked at Max, at the soft rise and fall of his chest, and tried to push away the image of him limping across the living room. So what's your alternative? We do nothing? Just let him get worse until he can't move at all? Of course not, she said, her tone softening. But maybe there's a middle ground. Pain management, supplements, less invasive options. I'm not saying we should give up on him. I just think we need to think about what he'd want if he could tell us. That broke something in me. He'd want to feel better. I snapped. He'd want to run and play and be himself again. Paige, this isn't just about what's easy for us. It's about giving him the chance to have a life he loves. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. You think I don't love him just as much as you do? I immediately regretted my tone. I know you do. I know you're trying to do what's best for him. I am too. For the next few days, we both avoided the subject, though it hung between us like a storm cloud. I threw myself into researching the surgery, reading every article and watching every video I could find. Paige did the same, though her focus seemed to be on alternatives, laser therapy, acupuncture, mobility aids. Every so often, she'd send me a link with a note like, maybe this could work? I'd reply with something like, it's not enough, and we'd spiral back into silence. Finally, we sat down together, each armed with our piles of notes and a shared sense of exhaustion. We both want what's best for him, Paige said quietly, but we're looking at it in completely different ways. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I know, and I don't want to put him through unnecessary pain, but I don't want to give up on him either. Neither do I, she said. But maybe we need to think about what his life will look like on the other side of this, not just what it'll take to get there. We stared at each other, both searching for some kind of middle ground that didn't seem to exist. Eventually, Paige broke the silence. Why don't we get a second opinion? Another vet, maybe even a specialist, someone who can help us figure out what Max really needs. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just move forward with the surgery, to fix the problem and be done with it. But I knew she was right. We owed Max more than just our own assumptions. Okay, I said finally. Let's do that. The second vet confirmed the first diagnosis, but added some nuance. The surgery had a high success rate, especially in otherwise healthy dogs like Max, but the recovery would indeed be arduous. Still, with proper care and patience, Max had an excellent chance of returning to his old self. As we drove home, Paige and I were quieter than usual. I think we should do it, I said finally. It won't be easy, but I think it's worth it. She sighed, long and heavy. If you really believe that, then I'll support it. But promise me we'll take it one day at a time. If it ever seems like it's too much for him, we'll reassess. I nodded, grateful for the compromise, but still carrying the weight of doubt. Was I being selfish? Was I projecting my own hopes onto Max, ignoring the toll this would take on him? Or was Paige the one holding him back, too afraid of the worst-case scenario to give him the chance he deserved? I don't know. We scheduled the surgery for next week, and now all I can do is hope we're making the right choice. Our cabin had always been a retreat for us, a place tucked far enough from cell towers and commitments that you could almost hear the responsibilities slide off your shoulders. The wood creaked familiarly as we arrived, and I saw my wife inhale the calm like it was fresh mountain air. She clutched her stack of books like treasure and headed straight for the porch, while I stashed the cooler and set my fishing rod by the door. This trip had been marked on the calendar for months, and every day of stress leading up to it made its arrival feel like opening a long-awaited gift. My wife had made it clear from the outset. No obligations, no schedules, no guests. A quiet promise to ourselves, one I had absolutely no intention of breaking. Or so I thought. The morning started perfectly, coffee in hand. I watched her nestled into a wicker chair with her book while the breeze rustled through the pines. Around mid-morning, my dad rolled up as planned. I'd invited him for a quick fishing trip, just him and me, a nostalgic nod to summers when we do this every other weekend. But the plan began to wobble the moment I saw my mom sitting beside him in the car. I thought this was just a father-son thing, I said, more surprised than upset. Oh, your mother wanted some fresh air too, Dad said casually, popping the trunk to grab his gear. Mom gave me a smile as she carried in bags, her enthusiasm pouring out in every movement. I glanced at the porch. My wife hadn't noticed yet. A flicker of panic lit up my chest, but I convinced myself it'd be fine. "Why don't you come fishing with us, Mom?" I offered, half hoping she'd decline. "Oh, I'll just hang back and keep her company," she chirped, waving her hand toward the cabin. "Don't worry about me." My wife had finally looked up from her book, and the moment their eyes met, I knew this wasn't going to end well. I should have stopped it there. Should have said something, anything. But in the gentle rush to hit the lake, I stupidly left them to their own devices, promising myself it wouldn't spiral into chaos. Dad and I spent hours on the water, catching up and casting lines, while an itch of guilt began to build in the back of my mind. Still, I convinced myself that Mom would charm her way into my wife's good graces, and that my wife would make the best of it. We came back late, dragging our haul of fish and damp boots through the door, only to step into the sharp tension that had replaced the calm we'd left behind. The table was set, dinner was served, but the temperature in the room could have frozen a summer day. Mom was all smiles as she told us how she'd cooked the entire meal, but her words carried a sharp edge when she added, "Your wife didn't lift a finger to help, just sat there reading." I barely had time to process her comment before my wife stood, grabbed her plate, and disappeared into the bedroom without a word. Dinner turned into a monologue, Mom's, specifically. She detailed every ounce of effort she poured into the meal and how disappointed she was that her gesture wasn't appreciated. I stared at my plate, gripping the fork a little too tightly. Finally, I cut her off. "You weren't invited," I said, my voice measured but firm. This was supposed to be a vacation for her. She's not here to entertain. Mom's face fell. She gawked at me like I just suggested she wasn't welcome anywhere, ever. "Well, if I knew I wasn't wanted, I wouldn't have come," she said, her voice trembling with indignation. "Then next time, don't," I shot back. The words escaped before I could soften them, but honestly, I didn't want to. I thought of my wife, sitting behind the bedroom door, her peace hijacked by a situation I could have prevented. My parents left soon after dinner, but not before Mom lobbed a final parting shot about how I should teach my wife to be a gracious hostess. I didn't reply. There wasn't any point. The door clicked shut behind them, and the cabin fell silent again, save for the faint hum of crickets outside. When I finally entered the bedroom, my wife was propped against the headboard, her book forgotten on her lap. She looked up at me, exhaustion pooling in her eyes. I should have stopped her, I admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. The second she showed up, I should have sent her home. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached out and took my hand, her thumb tracing small circles against my skin. "Just don't let it happen again," she said softly. The guilt didn't fade easily. Even as the days passed, I caught myself replaying that weekend, dissecting every decision that had led to the collision of my wife's boundaries and my mom's overbearing nature. It wasn't until our next trip, when I stood firm against another surprise visit, that I felt like I truly learned the lesson. Boundaries weren't just lines in the sand. They were walls we needed to defend, even if it meant disappointing someone on the other side. The morning started like any other, except for the bubbling excitement I had been nursing for weeks. Today was the day I'd finally spring my surprise on Alex. We'd been together for 5 years. 5 years of bad jokes, shared playlists, and debates over which shade of white to paint the walls. So, I'd planned a dinner at Trattoria Luce, the tiny Italian place where we had our first date. It wasn't just a dinner. I had secretly arranged for our favorite waiter, Marco, to bring out a custom dessert platter with, "To the next 5 years," scrawled in chocolate. As I fussed with my hair in the mirror, I heard Alex clattering around in the kitchen. I peeked out to find them stuffing a wicker basket with, was that a bottle of rose? Cheese? Strawberries? My brow furrowed. Alex wasn't much of a planner, and this kind of picnic prep was uncharacteristically elaborate. Suspiciously so. "What are you up to?" I asked, feigning nonchalance. Alex froze, a block of brie halfway to the basket. "Nothing," they said, too quickly. Then, realizing how guilty that sounded, they added, "Just felt like we could use a little fresh air today." I nodded slowly, my own secret nearly slipping out in the awkward pause. But I couldn't ruin it now, not when I'd already called in favors with the restaurant and spent an embarrassing amount of time picking out the perfect outfit. I decided not to press them, though a tiny worm of curiosity wriggled into my thoughts. By late afternoon, I was ready. The reservation was for 6, and Alex still hadn't mentioned the picnic. In fact, they'd been weirdly evasive all day, popping in and out of the apartment with vague excuses about errands. At 4:30, they came into the living room wearing a sundress I hadn't seen before, holding the now overflowing picnic basket. "All right, are you ready?" Alex asked, practically bouncing on their toes. "Ready for what?" I tried to sound confused, though I was already mentally recalculating the timeline to fit whatever they had planned before dinner. "Surely, we could swing both." "For the surprise," they said, grinning. "I know I've been acting weird, but I've got everything set up. We're going to the park for a sunset picnic, and there's a little something extra." "Wait," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "You planned a surprise? For today?" Their smile faltered. "Yeah. Why?" I hesitated, then blurted, "Because I planned a surprise too. Dinner at Trattoria Luce. At 6. The room went dead silent for a moment, the kind of silence that feels heavier than it should. Alex blinked at me, their excitement crumbling into a mix of confusion and dismay. "You're kidding." "I'm not kidding." I thought. I stopped myself. What was the point of explaining? We both clearly thought we were doing something thoughtful, something special. Instead, we tripped over each other's good intentions. Alex sighed, setting the basket down. "Well, this is awkward." "No kidding." I rubbed the back of my neck, already feeling the twinge of guilt. "What time is your picnic thing supposed to start?" I was aiming for, 5:30. But it's more of a vibe, you know? We could just roll with it. "We have to be at the restaurant by 6, I said, grimacing. "I mean, we could push it, but they're holding the table for us." We stared at each other, two people caught in the crossfire of their own overachieving kindness. Alex sank onto the couch with a huff, crossing their arms. "I spent all week putting this together. I even hired a photographer to snap some cute photos of us during golden hour." "Wait, what?" I felt a pang of envy at how thoughtful their idea was. My plan suddenly felt a little stale in comparison, like I'd taken the safe route while Alex had gone for something creative and unique. "Yeah, I wanted to do something different this year, something memorable." They looked at me, their expression softening. "But dinner at Luce, that's really sweet too." "We're such idiots," I muttered, flopping onto the couch beside them. "We both wanted to make today special, and now we've overbooked ourselves." Alex leaned their head against my shoulder, a small laugh escaping. "At least it's kind of funny. Statistically, how did we both end up doing this on the same day?" "Because we're hopeless romantics with bad communication skills?" I offered. They snorted. "Fair." For a moment, we just sat there, the picnic basket between us like a monument to our predicament. Neither of us wanted to let go of our plans entirely, but it was obvious we couldn't do both without butchering the spirit of each. I glanced at Alex, wondering if they were as torn as I felt. "All right," I said finally. "What if we compromise?" They raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "We go to the park first. Quick picnic, just the snacks, no fancy setup. Then we rush over to Luce for dinner. We'll be a little late, but I'll call ahead and let them know. It won't be perfect, but it's better than scrapping one of them completely." Alex tilted their head, considering. "I don't hate it, but the photographer—" "Invite them to dinner," I suggested. "They can take photos of us there. It's not golden hour, but the restaurant has those fairy lights you love. It could still be cute." Their eyes lit up, and for the first time since our plans collided, I felt like we might actually salvage the evening. "You think Marco will let us take photos inside?" "Are you kidding? Marco loves us. He'll probably photobomb." We both laughed, the tension finally easing. It wasn't the seamless day either of us had envisioned, but it felt like us, messy, improvised, and full of effort. And wasn't that the whole point? By the time we packed up the basket and headed out, I felt lighter. Sure, there were still some bruised expectations and a lingering sense of what if. But as Alex slipped their hand into mine, I couldn't help but think we'd manage to make the best of it. And isn't that what really counts in a relationship? The ability to adapt, to meet in the middle, even when things don't go as planned. Still, I can't shake the nagging feeling that maybe I could have handled it better, that my insistence on dinner might have overshadowed Alex's effort. So, AITA? When I got the idea, I thought I was brilliant. A big party, everyone they love in one place, confetti, a playlist of their favorite songs, complete with a surprise entry where we yell, "Happy birthday." It was foolproof. Nick, my boyfriend, had other thoughts. "It's too much," he said, swirling his coffee like it contained the secrets of the universe. We were sitting in our tiny kitchen, a faint hum from the fridge punctuating the conversation. "You know Jamie doesn't like crowds." I blinked at him. Jamie loves people. They literally volunteered to coordinate the neighborhood garage sale last year. If that's not a people-person thing, I don't know what is. "That's different," Nick countered, placing his mug down. "Jamie loves managing people. Being at the center of attention? Not so much." I crossed my arms. "Okay, but you're suggesting what? Just a small dinner? That's sweet, but kind of underwhelming for a milestone birthday." Nick rolled his eyes but smiled, softening the blow. "It's not just a dinner. It's a celebration with people who actually matter. Close friends, family. I think Jamie would appreciate something more heartfelt, not 100 random acquaintances cheering while they fake a smile." I opened my mouth to argue but stopped. He had a point, kind of. Jamie did have this weird thing about not liking to be on stage. But they also thrived in social situations. It was one of the reasons we both adored them. They could light up a room without trying. Surely they'd want a room big enough to glow in. Still, I could feel Nick's quiet conviction. It wasn't about one of us being right. We both wanted the same thing, for Jamie to feel special. But we were staring down wildly different roads to the same destination. "Look," I said, leaning forward, trying for diplomacy. "I know you think the big surprise might be a lot, but imagine how happy Jamie will be when they walk in and see everyone they love, all gathered just for them." Nick didn't miss a beat. "And imagine how overwhelmed they'll feel when they walk in and see everyone staring at them, expecting some kind of reaction." "Not everyone stares," I shot back, though I knew he was kind of right. Still, I wasn't ready to let this go. Jamie is always talking about how they wish they had more time to see all their friends. This is a chance to give them that. Nick shrugged, but his eyes narrowed just a bit, a subtle shift in his body language that told me he wasn't backing down either. "Or it's a chance to exhaust them. What if they spend the whole night worrying about talking to everyone? They'll feel obligated to make sure every single person has fun. You know how they get." I sighed, raking a hand through my hair. Jamie did have a way of overextending themselves, but wasn't that what birthdays were for? To let people show their love and appreciation, even if it meant a little extra chaos? "Okay," I said slowly, trying a different approach. "What if we did a mix? Like, we invite some people over for dinner, but then surprise them with more people later?" Nick raised an eyebrow. "You think doubling down is the compromise?" "It's not doubling down," I protested. "It's giving them the best of both worlds." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No offense, but your idea of compromise is a small party and a big one. That's not exactly meeting me halfway." I leaned back in my chair, frustrated but not angry. This was Nick, after all, thoughtful, methodical Nick. He wasn't trying to ruin my vision. He just genuinely believed his idea was better. And maybe it was for him. But I wasn't planning this for him. I was planning it for Jamie, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that a big celebration would be the memory they'd cherish forever. "Can I say something?" Nick asked after a moment, breaking the silence. "I think you're projecting a little." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm not saying it's a bad thing," he added quickly, palms up like he was trying to calm a wild animal. "But you love big moments, big gestures, big energy. Jamie doesn't always work that way." I stared at him, slightly stung, because he wasn't wrong. I did love grand plans. The last time we hosted Friendsgiving, I'd organized a mini talent show for dessert. Nick had only agreed after I promised he wouldn't have to perform. But this wasn't about me, it was about Jamie, right? "Okay," I said carefully, But isn't it possible that you're projecting too? You love small gatherings, quiet moments, deep conversations. Maybe that's what you'd want. He tilted his head, considering. Fair. But don't you think Jamie's more like me than you? I hated that I couldn't immediately disagree. Jamie did have Nick's quiet thoughtfulness, but they also had my love of connection, my need to bring people together. At least, I thought they did. Now I wasn't so sure. What if we're both wrong? I asked suddenly. Nick frowned. How so? What if Jamie doesn't care about the party or the dinner? What if they just want to eat cake and go to bed? Nick laughed, a soft, surprised sound that made me smile despite myself. Honestly, that does sound like them. We sat there for a moment, the tension loosening, but the question still hanging between us. Neither of us wanted to admit defeat because neither of us wanted to risk disappointing Jamie. Finally, I said, what if we just ask them? Nick shook his head. That ruins the surprise. Does it? I mean, we don't have to tell them everything. Just get a sense of what they'd want. Nick considered this, then sighed. I guess we could. We both knew it wasn't the perfect solution. It was a cop-out in a way to avoid choosing between our plans. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe Jamie deserved to have a say in their own celebration. As we cleaned up the coffee cups, I couldn't help but wonder. Had I been too stubborn? Was Nick right about me projecting? Or was he just as stuck in his own perspective as I was? Either way, we were about to find out. Let me set the scene. Last night, our fight started over lasagna. Not the lasagna itself, of course, but the principle of it. I was standing at the counter, carefully layering pasta sheets like I was constructing the eighth wonder of the world, when Liam dropped the bomb. I changed the itinerary for the trip, he said, nonchalant, as though we were discussing the weather or the merits of ricotta versus bechamel. We're skipping the hiking part and doing a wine tour instead. You'll thank me later. Now, if you know me, you know hiking is my thing. I'd spent weeks planning this trip, a mix of trail exploration, cozy mountain cabins, and a sprinkle of spontaneity for balance. I had spreadsheets, playlists, a gear checklist. I'd even tested our tent in the backyard to avoid any missing stakes, disasters. And here comes Liam, glass of wine in hand, casually announcing that he'd overwritten everything because he knows me better than I know myself. You'll thank me later, was his mantra, used when he ordered spicy food for me at restaurants even though I hate it. Or when he decided we didn't need a pet sitter for our cat, Charlie, because cats are independent. Spoiler, Charlie isn't. Now, he was wielding it like a shield against any complaints about my trip. I froze, lasagna sheet dangling midair. What do you mean you changed it? When were you planning to tell me? Liam shrugged. Just now. Hiking's not even fun, babe. It's just walking but harder. Wine is fun. Trust me, you'll love it. Trust him? Trust him? He may as well have set fire to my carefully curated Google Docs. Did it occur to you that maybe I planned hiking because I find it fun? My voice was sharp, sharper than I intended. That maybe this trip isn't just about what you think is fun? Oh, come on, he said, rolling his eyes. It's not like I canceled the whole trip. I just improved it. And that's when something inside me snapped. I wasn't the type to yell or throw things, but passive aggression. That was my arena. If he thought he could unilaterally change my plans, well, two could play that game. The next morning, I woke up early and canceled the Airbnb. The whole thing, poof, gone. I even got a partial refund because I claimed a sudden family emergency. Then, I booked a different place on the other side of the state. A beachside bungalow instead of the mountain retreat. No hiking trails. No wine tours. Just surfboards and seagulls. And I didn't tell him. Not yet. When Liam came downstairs, yawning and scratching his head, I smiled sweetly over my coffee. I've been thinking, maybe you're right. Hiking is a bit much. So, I made a little adjustment to the trip. He raised an eyebrow. Adjustment? I found a cute place by the beach instead. Isn't that perfect? You love the beach. For a second, he looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to laugh or be mad. Wait, you changed everything? Just improved it, I said, echoing his words from the night before. You'll thank me later. At first, he didn't respond. He just stared at me, trying to read my face. Then, slowly, he shook his head. You're kidding, right? Tell me you're kidding. Why would I be kidding? Beaches are fun. You hate the beach. You call sand nature's glitter because it gets everywhere. I shrugged, taking an infuriatingly casual sip of my coffee. Guess I'm expanding my horizons. He groaned, running a hand through his hair. Why are you doing this? Is this about the wine tour? Because I was trying to make things better for both of us. Better for both of us? Or just easier for you? Admit it, you don't want to hike because you're lazy. Lazy? Seriously? At least I didn't nuke the whole trip out of spite. Oh, we were off to the races now. Every petty grievance we'd ever had came spilling out like a broken vending machine. He accused me of being controlling. I accused him of being selfish. He brought up the time I planned our anniversary dinner at a vegan restaurant even though he hates tofu. I reminded him of the time he booked a surprise trip to Vegas, forgetting I don't gamble. By the end of it, the lasagna I'd made the night before was still untouched in the fridge. Our voices were hoarse, and Charlie the cat had fled to the safety of the laundry room. In the end, neither of us backed down. He refused to go to the beach, and I refused to rebook the cabin. By the time Friday rolled around, we were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, scrolling on our phones in stony silence. The trip was officially dead, and neither of us wanted to be the first to admit we were wrong. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, Liam leaned against the bathroom doorframe and sighed. You know this is stupid, right? I said, toothpaste foaming in my mouth. I mean, we fought about dumb stuff before, but this takes the cake. Yep. Spit, rinse, towel dry. He hesitated, then added, So, are you gonna fix it? I looked at him, toothbrush still in hand, and raised an eyebrow. Fix what? The trip. Oh, no. You wanted changes, remember? You fix it. And that was that. We ended up spending the weekend at home, eating frozen pizza and glaring at each other over Netflix menus. The lasagna sat untouched in the fridge for so long that I eventually threw it out. Now, here's where I'm stuck. I know I probably shouldn't have canceled the Airbnb. That was petty. But isn't it just as bad to hijack someone else's plans without consulting them? Liam swears he was trying to make things better for both of us, but it felt more like he was just steamrolling me. So, Reddit. AITA? For weeks, I poured myself into planning the perfect rooftop dinner party. It wasn't just any gathering. It was my first real attempt at hosting something sophisticated, something that felt like an adult milestone. My apartment's rooftop has a killer view of the skyline, and I'd always thought it was wasted on casual barbecues or quick selfies. This time, I wanted candles, soft music, and a spread so impressive people would remember it for years. I had spreadsheets for the guest list, Pinterest boards for the decor, and a detailed schedule to make sure everything went off without a hitch. The list was small, just 10 people. It was a delicate balance. My closest friends from work, a couple of neighbors I'd grown close to, and a few college friends I still kept in touch with. I knew it couldn't be everyone. There just wasn't space, and more importantly, I wanted an intimate vibe. The whole thing would have been ruined if it felt chaotic or mismatched. That's where Amanda came in. Amanda is my cousin, and I'll admit she's been like a sister to me most of my life. She's the one who got me through high school breakups, who knew how to make me laugh so hard I'd cry. But Amanda is also a lot. She has this way of making every situation revolve around her. At parties, she's the one doing dramatic story reenactments, complete with voices and sound effects. She'll pull people into impromptu karaoke, even if there's no music, or spend 20 minutes interrupting someone else's anecdote to tell one of her own. And look, I love her for it, most of the time, but this wasn't that kind of event. I didn't want Amanda turning my candlelit rooftop into her personal improv stage. I just couldn't risk it. So, I made the call not to invite her. It wasn't personal, at least not in the way people mean when they say that. I genuinely believed she'd understand if I explained that I was going for a quieter, more low-key vibe. Amanda isn't dumb. She's self-aware enough to know how she can be. Besides, she's not one to dwell on things. She has a million friends and always seems to have plans, so I figured she wouldn't even notice she wasn't on the list. The night of the party, everything was perfect. The weather was cool but not cold. The skyline looked like it had been painted just for us, and my carefully curated playlist was the perfect backdrop to the low hum of laughter and clinking glasses. My friend Melanie brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my electric bill, and I felt this ridiculous sense of pride when people kept complimenting the charcuterie board I'd agonized over. For once, I wasn't just the person tagging along to someone else's party. I was the host, and I nailed it. The next morning, I woke up to a string of messages from Amanda. Wow, so I see how it is. Didn't think I'd find out, huh? Real classy, Lisa. My stomach dropped. Apparently, she'd seen an Instagram story someone posted from the party. It had a wide-angle shot of the table with me laughing at something, completely oblivious to the camera. Amanda hadn't just noticed she wasn't there. She was furious. I called her, figuring I could smooth it over. Hey, I started, trying to sound casual. I was gonna call you later, but I guess you saw the party pics already. Yeah, I saw them, she snapped. Looked fun. Glad I wasn't in the way or anything. I tried to explain my reasoning. It wasn't like that. I just, I was going for a specific vibe, and I thought maybe this wasn't really your kind of thing. My kind of thing, she interrupted. You mean not loud and obnoxious enough for me? God, Lisa, just say it. You didn't want me there because you thought I'd embarrass you. Her voice cracked on that last word, and I felt a twist of guilt. But I doubled down. That's not fair. It's not about embarrassment. I wanted something small and quiet, and I didn't think you'd enjoy it anyway. It's not like I'm the only person who's ever thrown a party without inviting every single person they know. But I'm not just some person you know, she said. I'm your cousin. I'm practically family. I could hear the anger give way to hurt, but I still felt justified. Amanda wasn't wrong. She is family. But that didn't mean I had to include her in everything, especially when I knew she'd clash with the atmosphere I'd worked so hard to create. I told her as much, though I tried to soften it. I just didn't think it would work this time, Amanda. I wasn't trying to hurt you, okay? She laughed bitterly. Well, congrats, because you did. You could have at least been honest with me. Instead, I have to find out from some random Instagram post that you thought I wasn't good enough for your little dinner party. That stung. I tried one more time to explain, but she cut me off. You know what? Forget it. Have fun with your vibes. I'll remember this the next time you need someone to drop everything and show up for you. She hung up before I could respond. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling in my chest. Part of me felt awful for hurting her, but another part of me was still convinced I'd made the right choice. Amanda has always been larger than life, and I didn't want her overshadowing something that mattered so much to me. Is that selfish? Maybe. But isn't it my right to decide the kind of event I want to host? I keep replaying our conversation in my head, wondering if I should have handled it differently. But no matter how much I second-guess myself, I can't shake the feeling that I was justified. I did what I thought was best for the party, for the guests, and honestly, for myself. So now I'm left with this nagging question. AITA? It started with an innocent thought. Wouldn't this be so much better if we just tweaked it a little? That's how my brain works. I see a plan and immediately start editing it in my head, like a chef improvising on a recipe. So, when my family's big annual outing came up, and they left me in charge of the logistics this year, I thought, perfect, I'll make it extra special. Except, extra special meant something slightly different to me than it did to everyone else. The plan had been simple. A Saturday picnic at Lake Harmony. We've been going there for years. It's my mom's favorite spot, with calm waters and those big, shady trees she loves to read under. My siblings always set up volleyball on the beach, and my dad brings his collapsible fishing chair. It's the family's sacred summer tradition. I agreed to coordinate everything this year: food, carpooling, timing, the works, but the idea of going to Lake Harmony again felt, stale. Like wearing the same outfit to every party. That's when I thought of Whispering Pines, this cute little lake resort I'd stumbled across on Instagram. It had kayaks, paddleboards, even a small wine bar. Sure, it was about 45 minutes further out than Lake Harmony, but come on, it was Whispering Pines. Why settle for sandwiches and folding chairs when we could have charcuterie and paddleboards? I figured I'd surprise them, knowing they'd love it once they got there. Plus, no one explicitly said we had to go to Lake Harmony. They just assumed. The first ripple of rebellion was moving the start time from 10 a.m. to noon. No big deal, right? I'm not a morning person, and the idea of herding everyone into cars at the crack of dawn sounded like torture. Then came the menu. My mom had specifically asked for homemade potato salad and deviled eggs, like she makes every year. I ordered gourmet picnic baskets from this artisanal deli instead. Less prep, less stress. I even threw in a bottle of rose, imagining how thrilled she'd be. Saturday morning came, and everyone showed up at my apartment, bags packed, faces full of anticipation. My dad had his fishing rod slung over one shoulder, and my younger sister held the volleyball net. "Why are we meeting here instead of driving straight to the lake?" my brother asked, squinting suspiciously. "It's just easier this way," I said breezily. They didn't press further, so I herded them into the cars. About 40 minutes into the drive, my mom, who was following in the car behind me, called. "Are we lost? This doesn't feel like the right direction," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Don't worry, it's a shortcut," I lied, as we veered further from Lake Harmony and closer to Whispering Pines. When we finally pulled up to the resort, I was vibrating with excitement. I couldn't wait to see their reactions. "Welcome to Whispering Pines," I announced with a grin, gesturing to the sparkling water and docked kayaks. Silence. "Wait, this isn't Lake Harmony," my dad said, bewildered. "What happened to the fishing area?" My mom was next, looking stricken. "I told you I wanted to read under those big trees. There's no shade here." My siblings, meanwhile, were eyeing the paddleboards warily, as though I just asked them to swim across the Atlantic. "This is way better than Lake Harmony," I said, trying to sell it. "Look, there's wine, gourmet food, paddleboards." "Paddleboards?" my brother interrupted. "We brought a volleyball net, not wetsuits. You could have told us." "You're all being dramatic," I said, laughing nervously. "It's still a lake, just a cooler one. And it's not like it's a huge change. You'll love it, trust me." No one moved. My mom looked like she was about to cry. "I specifically said I wanted my potato salad and deviled eggs," she said softly. "I didn't even bring a book because I thought we'd be sitting under the trees, not baking in the sun." I glanced at the resort's patio, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, now you can sip rose and relax." That didn't land either. "This is ridiculous," my dad said, shaking his head. "You just decided on your own to scrap the plan we all agreed on?" "It's not scrapping, it's upgrading," I shot back, defensive now. "You're acting like I ruined Christmas. I just made it better." "You made it different," my sister said, her arms crossed. "For you, not for us." That stung. Was I really being selfish? Whispering Pines felt so obviously superior to Lake Harmony that I couldn't understand why they weren't thanking me. The tension hung thick as we trudged to the picnic area I'd reserved. No one touched the charcuterie boards. My dad half-heartedly attempted to fish off the dock, but gave up after 10 minutes. My siblings didn't even try the paddle boards. My mom finally sat down in the sun, her shoulders hunched, nibbling on a piece of baguette like it was cardboard. I spent the whole day oscillating between irritation and confusion. How could they not see I'd made an executive decision for the greater good? The drive home was worse. Silent, except for the occasional sigh or muttered complaint. When we got back, my mom pulled me aside. "You know, we trust you to handle things," she said. "But this? You didn't even think about what anyone else wanted." "I did think about it," I argued. "I thought you'd all love it if you gave it a chance." She shook her head. "You thought you'd love it. Big difference." I'm still not sure what I did wrong. Was it really that bad to switch things up? A little spontaneity never hurt anyone, right? And honestly, they could have made more of an effort to enjoy themselves. I mean, who wouldn't prefer Whispering Pines to boring old Lake Harmony? When my sister Anna asked me to proofread her business plan, I felt a mix of pride and apprehension. She'd been pouring her heart into launching her dream bakery, and I admired her determination. But when I opened the draft, I quickly realized it needed significant work. Her enthusiasm was clear, but the numbers didn't add up, and her marketing plan relied too much on word of mouth without a concrete strategy. I knew I had to tell her, but my stomach twisted. Anna didn't handle criticism well, even the constructive kind. Still, if I didn't speak up, I feared she might lose money or even jeopardize her reputation if the business failed. She deserved better than that. I spent the evening carefully crafting my feedback. I sandwiched every critique with praise, emphasizing her creativity and commitment. By the time I was done, the document glistened with track changes and comments, but I felt good about it. I imagined Anna thanking me and saying something like, "I knew you'd help me get this right." That's what I clung to as I texted her to set up a time to discuss it. The next morning, I brought coffee and pastries to her apartment, hoping the peace offering would soften the blow. She greeted me with her usual warmth, chatting animatedly about logo ideas and potential menu items. My heart sank knowing I was about to dim that enthusiasm, even temporarily. "So, I began, carefully. I went through your business plan, and I think it's a great start. You've done an amazing job outlining your vision." Her eyes lit up, and she beamed at me. "Thank you. I knew you'd get it. Isn't it exciting?" "It is," I agreed quickly. "But I did notice a few areas where you might want to tweak things. Like your projected revenue for the first year. It seems a little optimistic based on industry averages. Maybe we could adjust it to something more conservative to present a realistic picture to investors." Her smile faltered. "You think I'm being unrealistic?" No, I said, backpedaling. "I just think investors might have questions about it, and it's better to address those up front. It's nothing you can't handle." She crossed her arms, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I've been researching this for months. I know what I'm doing." "I know you do," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "That's why this plan has so much potential. I just want to make sure it's as strong as it can be, so you get the support you deserve." Anna grabbed the draft from the table, flipping through the pages. Her expression darkened as she scanned my comments. "You think my marketing plan is too vague?" she quoted, her voice sharp. "I'm planning to rely on social media and word of mouth because that's what works for small businesses." "True," I conceded, "but it helps to show specifics, like your social media strategy, target audience, or how you'll measure success. Investors like seeing a roadmap." She slammed the papers down, startling me. "So basically, you think this sucks?" "Anna, no. I think it's great." "Doesn't sound like it," she snapped. "You're nitpicking everything I've worked on for months. Do you even want me to succeed?" That last question hit me like a punch. Of course I wanted her to succeed. That was the whole point of this conversation. "I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe in you," I said, my voice quieter now. "I know how hard you've worked, and I want to make sure it pays off. That's all." She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes blazing with hurt and anger. "Well, maybe I don't need your help," she said finally. "If you don't believe in my vision, fine. I'll figure it out myself." I felt the air leave the room as she stormed off to her bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, stunned and heartsick, staring at the untouched pastries. This wasn't how I wanted things to go. I replayed the conversation in my head, wondering if I'd been too blunt or if there was a kinder way to approach it. But no matter how I sliced it, the truth was the truth. Her plan needed work, and I couldn't see a way to say that without risking offense. After a few minutes, I gathered my things and left. On the walk home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed her, even though my intentions were good. I wanted to protect her from making mistakes that could hurt her long term, but all I'd managed to do was hurt her feelings. Maybe I should have just kept my mouth shut and let her figure it out on her own. But then again, if something went wrong and I hadn't said anything, wouldn't I have felt just as guilty? Now I'm stuck wondering if I did the right thing. Did I overstep? Was I too critical? Or was I just trying to help someone I love in the only way I knew how? When my cousin Kelly called, her voice was a frantic mix of desperation and charm. "You're a lifesaver," she gushed before I could even say hello. "I'm in a bind, and you're literally my only hope." Kelly always had a way of turning her problems into everyone else's emergencies, but this time she seemed genuinely on edge. She'd lost her apartment after breaking up with her boyfriend, again, and needed somewhere to crash for just a couple of weeks while she figured things out. 2 weeks, I said, more to myself than her. "Okay, but you'll need to pull your weight. And there are some house rules." "Of course. Totally." You won't even know I'm there, she promised. I should have known better. Kelly arrived the next afternoon in a cloud of perfume and drama, dragging 3 suitcases and a box labeled important things. She looked around my small apartment with a critical eye, muttered something about how cozy it was, then hugged me so tightly I almost forgave her tone. This is going to be so good for both of us, she declared, already sounding suspiciously like she'd settled in for the long haul. At first, I bent over backward to make her feel welcome. I cleaned out the guest room, stocked the fridge with her favorite snacks, and even loaned her my favorite fleece blanket for her Netflix binges. The first night, we stayed up late reminiscing about childhood summers, laughing over stories about camp pranks and Kelly's notorious middle school crushes. It felt like old times, chaotic but fun. But by day 3, the cracks began to show. For someone in a bind, Kelly had an uncanny knack for doing nothing. She slept until noon, then spent the afternoon scrolling through her phone, sipping kombucha she'd added to my grocery list without asking. When I got home from work, she'd regale me with tales of all the things she planned to do. Visit job fairs, reconnect with old friends, maybe even go back to school. But by the next morning, she'd be face down in bed again, surrounded by empty snack bags and half-drunk energy drinks. Then there was the artistic expression. Kelly had always fancied herself a free spirit, but I hadn't anticipated her new hobby, found art. She started repurposing my belongings, turning a vintage scarf from my grandmother into a wall hanging, arranging my books by color, and once, horrifyingly, gluing a pair of my old earrings to a canvas. It's all about vibes, she explained when I found her in the living room with a glue gun and my favorite mug, which she was apparently turning into a planter. By week 2, I was silently begging her to leave. She turned the guest room into what looked like the aftermath of a hurricane, was mysteriously behind on all her job applications, and had started inviting random people over for vision board workshops. When I asked her to cut back on the social gatherings, she pouted like a teenager. "You're stifling my creativity," she said, as if I'd just outlawed joy itself. The final straw came when I came home to find my couch covered in glitter. Glitter. Apparently, Kelly had hosted an impromptu DIY festival fashion night with some of her friends. When I confronted her, she waved me off. "Relax, it's biodegradable glitter. Besides, this place needed some sparkle." I tried to stay calm. "Kelly," I began. "We agreed this was temporary. I've tried to be patient, but you're not respecting my space, and I don't see you making an effort to move forward." Her eyes widened in mock offense. "Effort? Do you know how hard it is to stay positive in the face of adversity? I've been working on myself, okay? And now you're kicking me out?" "I'm not kicking you out," I said, though the idea was increasingly tempting. "I'm asking you to take responsibility. You can't stay here forever." Kelly's face hardened. "You're unbelievable. After everything I've been through, you're making this about you. I thought you were different, but I guess not." She grabbed her phone and stormed off, presumably to call one of her workshop friends to vent about my oppressive vibes. The next day, she packed her bags and left without saying goodbye, though she did leave behind a half-finished canvas that read, "Some people just don't understand art." Now my apartment smells faintly of glitter glue, and I keep finding stray sequins in weird places. And Kelly? She hasn't spoken to me since, but every now and then, I catch a glimpse of her Instagram, posing in a cafe, captioned, "Never let toxic people dull your shine." When I got the job offer, I was sure it was a mistake. The email had come late at night, the kind you only open out of boredom while scrolling in bed. But there it was, plain as day, an offer from a major design firm in New York City. It was the kind of opportunity I dreamed about since college, the culmination of all those late nights hunched over sketchbooks and digital renderings. My heart had leapt. Then, just as quickly, it sank. "How can you even think about leaving?" Emily's voice cracked when I told her over coffee the next morning. My sister had always been my anchor, the one constant through our roller coaster childhood. At 26, she'd already married and had a toddler, Liam, who worshipped me like some kind of comic book hero. "We just got everything stable, and now you want to go?" Stable. It was her favorite word these days, the way she clung to it like a lifeline. It hadn't been easy. Our dad's sudden death 3 years ago had shattered us. The three of us, Emily, me, and Mom, had been thrown into roles we weren't ready for. Emily became the glue, raising Liam while still trying to finish her degree. I became the fixer, the one who handled broken sinks, insurance papers, and long, awkward silences at the dinner table. And Mom? Well, she tried. Sometimes. This isn't about running away. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, I said, though my voice faltered under her stare. I'd be stupid not to take it. She folded her arms and leaned back in her chair. You don't get it, do you? You're not just some guy going off to chase his dream. You're you. Liam looks up to you. Mom depends on you. I need you. I need this too, I said, more sharply than I intended. Guilt twisted in my stomach, but the words kept coming. I've put my life on hold for everyone else for years. This is my chance to finally do something for myself. Her eyes glistened, and for a second, I thought she might cry. Instead, she pushed back her chair, stood, and grabbed her back. You've already decided, haven't you? No, I lied. Even though the decision had been a foregone conclusion the second I read that email. She walked away, her shoulders stiff, and I sat there alone, staring at the mug she'd left behind. That night, I tried to bring it up with Mom. She was sitting in her usual spot on the couch, knitting something for Liam. Her hands paused mid-stitch when I mentioned the offer. New York City? That's a big leap, she said carefully. Are you sure you're ready for it? I sighed. Mom, it's not about being ready. It's about needing more. I love you and Em and Liam, but I feel like I'm suffocating here. This town is too small. The jobs are too small. I want to design things that matter, make an impact. She didn't look at me. You make an impact here. On us. Her words hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd been the one steady presence in her life. The one who stayed up late helping with bills or fixing the ancient dishwasher that never worked right. But was that all I was meant to be? It's not like I'm abandoning you, I said, softer this time. I'll visit. I'll call. It's not the end of the world. Mom smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. That's what your father used to say every time he missed a school recital or forgot an anniversary. It's not the end of the world. But it felt like it sometimes. That shut me up. I sat with her for a while, watching her knit, the soft clicking of needles filling the silence. Emily didn't call the next day, or the day after. It wasn't unusual for her to go radio silent when she was upset, but this time it stung more than usual. I thought about texting her a dozen times, but always put my phone down. Instead, I spent my evenings pacing my apartment, weighing the pros and cons of leaving. For every reason to go, there was a pang of guilt reminding me why I should stay. Liam's face kept flashing in my mind. The way he'd light up whenever I walked through the door, the way he'd beg me to play superheroes with him. On the 5th day, Emily called. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. Can we talk? We met at the park, the same spot where we used to take Liam when he was still small enough for a stroller. He was there now, running in circles and shouting something about dinosaurs. I've been thinking, Emily began, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I shouldn't have blown up at you. It's your life. You're allowed to want things. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Thanks, Em. But, she added, and I tensed again, I just don't understand how you're okay with leaving everything behind. Leaving us behind. I'm not leaving you behind, I said, and this time I meant it. But I can't stay stuck here forever. I need to know I tried, that I didn't let fear or guilt hold me back. She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on Liam. I get that. I do. But it's going to be hard. For me, for Mom, for him. I followed her gaze, watching Liam hop between patches of grass like they were lava. I know, I said, and it's hard for me too. I don't want to hurt you guys. But staying would hurt too. Just in a different way. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging between us. Then Emily sighed and reached over to squeeze my hand. Just promise me you'll visit. A lot. Every chance I get, I said, my throat tight. And call. Like, actually call. None of this, I'll text you later crap. I laughed, even though my eyes were stinging. Deal. We didn't solve everything that day. Mom was still distant, and Liam didn't understand why his favorite uncle was suddenly moving so far away. But as I hugged Emily goodbye, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe we'd figure it out. Maybe this was just a new chapter, not an ending. Still, as I packed up my apartment and booked my one-way ticket, I couldn't shake the question lingering in the back of my mind. Last weekend, my friends and I decided to do something big for the holidays. One of those Instagram-worthy getaways where everyone splits costs and claims they're living their best lives. Naturally, the planning fell on me, as it always does. I have a knack for details and, quite frankly, no one else in the group is capable of organizing anything more complicated than ordering a pizza. So, I spent hours finding the perfect cabin, coordinating schedules, researching group discounts, and managing the logistics of meals, activities, and carpooling. All that while juggling my job and social life. It was exhausting, but I didn't mind because I'm the kind of person who loves seeing everything come together flawlessly. The trip turned out amazing, and everyone had the time of their lives. Or so I thought. The issue started when it was time to settle the bill. You know how it goes with group trips. There's always one person who forgets to Venmo you, someone else who claims they'll get the next one, and at least one guy who conveniently doesn't have the app installed. To make things easier, I had taken charge of all the payments. The Airbnb was under my name, the groceries were on my card, and I fronted the cash for activities like the hot tub rental and the kayaking tour. At the end of the trip, I added everything up, divided the total evenly, and sent a spreadsheet to the group. Everyone paid me back promptly, except for my cousin Lisa. Lisa's the kind of person who always wants to help with planning, but ends up doing next to nothing. She'll send one half-hearted suggestion, like, "We should do s'mores," and then expect a round of applause. She Venmo'd me almost double the amount she owed, and I noticed immediately. My first thought was that it was an accident. Maybe she added an extra zero or got confused by the spreadsheet. But then I remembered something. Lisa spent the entire weekend complaining. She didn't like the brand of coffee we bought. She thought the hike was too uphill. She whined that the bedrooms were unevenly assigned because she got a smaller bed. And the kicker? She made a snide comment about how I must enjoy bossing everyone around. I'll be honest, by the end of the trip, I was done with Lisa. So, when I saw the overpayment in my Venmo account, I thought to myself, maybe this is karma's way of compensating me for all the stress I went through. After all, I'd spent hours of my free time making sure everything went smoothly. I didn't charge anyone for the gas I used driving to the cabin or the dozens of coffees I bought while scouting locations. If anything, I deserved a tip. So, I kept the money. A couple of days later, Lisa texted me. It was short and passive-aggressive. "Hey, I just realized I sent too much for the trip. Can you send back the extra?" No please, no thank you, just an assumption that I'd return it. Her tone immediately rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, how about a little gratitude for the person who literally made the trip happen? If I hadn't stepped up, we'd probably still be sitting around debating dates and Airbnb options. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think. On one hand, it was her money, and maybe she did send it by accident. But on the other hand, why should I feel guilty for accepting what was basically a token of appreciation for all my hard work? I told myself she should have been more careful with her Venmo transfers. It's not my job to police her financial mistakes. A day passed, and Lisa texted me again. This time she was a little more direct. "Hey, did you see my message? I'm short on cash this week, so I really need that extra back ASAP." This annoyed me even more. If she was short on cash, why was she overpaying in the first place? And why was she dragging me into her poor budgeting decisions? I decided to ignore the message and let her sweat a little. She's never had a problem asking people for money, but when it comes to pulling her weight in a group setting, she suddenly becomes helpless. By the third text, Lisa had dropped the friendly pretense altogether. "Can you just send the money back? I know you got it. It's not yours to keep." That one made me laugh out loud. Not mine to keep? Excuse me, but I wasn't the one who messed up the payment. If anything, she owed me for tolerating her bad attitude all weekend. So, I decided to send her a response that I thought was perfectly reasonable. "Hey Lisa, I noticed the overpayment, but I figured it was your way of saying thanks for all the work I put into planning the trip. If that's not the case, I can deduct the time I spent organizing and refund whatever's left." Her reply was instant and furious. Are you serious? You're charging me for your time? Nobody asked you to plan the trip. I rolled my eyes. Typical Lisa. Always happy to benefit from someone else's effort, but never willing to acknowledge it. I didn't bother replying after that. She kept texting, though, each message angrier than the last. One of them even included some nonsense about how she'd never trust me with money again, as if I'd ever volunteer to plan another trip with her in the group. The rest of the friend group got wind of the situation because, of course, Lisa couldn't let it go. She made it sound like I'd robbed her at gunpoint. A few of them reached out to ask if I was okay, and I told them my side of the story. To my surprise, most of them agreed with me. They said Lisa had been insufferable during the trip and that I deserved some kind of compensation for all my effort. One even joked that I should have charged a Lisa tax from the start, but not everyone was on my side. My best friend Sarah said I should have just sent the money back immediately. She argued that keeping it made me look petty, and that it wasn't worth losing a family member over a few bucks. I told her it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. Why should I let Lisa walk all over me and get away with being ungrateful? Sarah sighed and said, "You're not wrong, but you're also not right." So now I'm stuck wondering, did I handle this the wrong way? Should I have sent the money back and let Lisa off the hook? Or was I justified in keeping it as a symbolic thank you for everything I did? I never thought a birthday party could turn into a quiet war, but there I was, surrounded by balloons and the smell of burnt-out candles, wondering how it had come to this. It was my nephew's 5th birthday, and the backyard was buzzing with kids hopped up on sugar, their parents trying to rein them in without spilling their drinks. Somewhere between happy birthday and the start of the piñata massacre, I had unwittingly become the villain. It started innocently enough, as these things usually do. My sister Lily was showing off the homemade dinosaur cake she'd spent 2 days making. It was impressive. I'll give her that. Layers of chocolate sponge stacked into a 3D T-Rex, complete with green frosting scales and candy claws. People were gathering around, taking pictures like it was a Louvre exhibit. "It's nothing," she said with a humble little laugh. "Just something I whipped up for Logan. He loves dinosaurs." I smiled, genuinely impressed but also unable to resist. Wow, that's ambitious. I mean, I always stuck to cupcakes when Mia was that age. Not as flashy, but, practical. They're so easy to hand out. Lily glanced at me, her polite smile freezing slightly. Well, Logan wanted a T-Rex, so I figured why not go all out? "Of course," I said, nodding. "It's just, with work and everything, I guess I've always had to prioritize time over perfection. But hey, if you've got the hours to spare, more power to you." Her smile thinned, but she didn't say anything. I thought it was a harmless comment, a little perspective on the trade-offs we all make. But then my cousin Rachel, who had been circling the snack table like a hawk, chimed in. "Oh, Lily, tell them about the puppet show you organized for Logan's preschool last month," she said, her voice practically dripping with admiration. Lily waved a hand, pretending to be embarrassed. "It wasn't a big deal. Just a little something I put together for their dinosaur week. I made the puppets out of felt." "That's amazing," Rachel gushed. "I don't know how you do it." I couldn't let that one go. "Well, it's great that you've got the energy," I said, my tone casual. I remember when Mia's school needed volunteers for their science fair, and I was running on fumes from pulling double shifts. I still managed to throw together a volcano project that won 3rd place, though. There was a pause, just a brief hitch in the flow of the conversation. Rachel looked at Lily, then back at me. "That's nice," she said finally, her voice just a little cooler. The day marched on, and the comparisons kept bubbling up as naturally as weeds in a garden. When Lily showed off the hand-painted party favors she'd made, little dinosaur eggs with each kid's name on them, I couldn't help but mention how I'd once managed to host Mia's birthday party at an actual skating rink, despite being between jobs at the time. When someone complimented the adorable dinosaur-themed scavenger hunt, I brought up how I'd orchestrated a treasure hunt for Mia's Girl Scout troop that included a homemade map and actual buried treasure, a box of chocolate coins, but still. At first, I thought I was just participating in the conversation. We were swapping parenting stories, right? It wasn't until after the piñata carnage that I realized something had shifted. I was sitting with my cousin Michael, nursing a soda and watching kids scramble for candy. He leaned over, lowering his voice. You really like reminding people how hard you've had it, don't you? I blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? Michael raised an eyebrow. Come on. Every time Lily or anyone talks about something they've done, you have to one-up them with some sob story about how much harder it was for you. That's not true, I said, laughing awkwardly. I'm just sharing my perspective. It's not like I'm lying. He shrugged. Maybe not, but it's not exactly generous. Sometimes it's okay to let people shine, you know? I stared at him, my stomach twisting in a way I didn't like. Before I could respond, Lily appeared, holding a tray of cupcakes. Hey, she said, her tone unusually flat. Can we talk? Michael took that as his cue to leave, melting into the crowd. Lily sat down next to me, setting the tray between us. I've been meaning to say something all day, she began, her voice soft but steady. I know you don't mean anything by it, but the way you talk about your experiences, it kind of feels like you're putting down mine. My throat tightened. Lily, that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm just being honest about what I've been through. It's not my fault if my life's been harder. She tilted her head, giving me a sad sort of smile. It's not about whose life is harder. It's about celebrating the moment. Every time I share something I've done, it feels like you're trying to remind me it's not good enough because you've done more with less. It hurts. I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up a hand. I know you don't mean to. I wish you could see it from my perspective. She stood up before I could respond, leaving the cupcakes behind. I sat there for a long time, staring at the tray. On the surface, her words seemed dramatic. Was it really that big a deal? But there was a small, uncomfortable part of me that wondered if she had a point. Was I trying to prove something? Or was I just sharing my truth? By the time I got home, my head was buzzing with the weight of the day. I replayed every conversation, every comment, and tried to figure out if I really was the bad guy or if everyone else was just being overly sensitive. After all, shouldn't we be able to share our experiences without walking on eggshells? The old oak tree at the edge of Hollow Creek had been the center of ghost stories for as long as anyone in town could remember. Its branches twisted and clawed at the sky like they were alive, and the hollow in its trunk was said to be a doorway to, well, something. What, exactly, depended on who was telling the tale. Demons? Lost souls? Parallel worlds? Take your pick. But none of that had ever deterred me, Matt, and Gina from making it our hangout spot every summer since we were 10. This summer, though, things were different. Gina had come back from her first year of college acting strange, quieter, like she'd seen something she wasn't ready to talk about. Matt said she was just adjusting to being back home. I wasn't so sure. One humid July evening, as fireflies blinked lazily in the thick air, Gina suggested we camp under the oak. Matt was thrilled. He loved the tree's spooky reputation and was always hoping for something supernatural to happen. I hesitated. There was something about the way Gina suggested it, her voice low and almost eager, but I wasn't about to be the wet blanket. We set up camp just before sunset. Gina seemed oddly focused on the hollow in the tree, running her fingers along its edges like she was trying to feel something just out of reach. You guys ever think about what's really in here? She asked, her voice distant. Just spiders and bad decisions, Matt joked, poking at the hole with a stick. Gina didn't laugh. Instead, she dropped her bag by the hollow and started pulling out items I didn't recognize. A small, silver mirror, a bundle of herbs tied with black thread, and a jar filled with some kind of reddish powder. Matt raised an eyebrow. What's all that? An experiment, Gina said, her eyes glittering in the fading light. I've been reading about, I don't know, other dimensions, hidden places. Thought I'd try something. Matt, always up for chaos, leaned in. What kind of experiment? Are we talking Ouija board, or are we about to summon the next big bad from a horror movie? Gina smirked, but it wasn't her usual smirk. It was sharper, darker. Just watch. Before either of us could argue, she started sprinkling the powder in a circle around the hollow, muttering something under her breath. The air seemed to grow heavier, thicker, like the world was holding its breath. Matt tried to make a joke about Gina's witch phase, but his voice came out strained, unsure. When Gina lit the bundle of herbs and held it near the hollow, the smoke didn't drift upward like it should have. Instead, it was pulled into the tree, vanishing into the darkness. The temperature dropped. A low, humming sound started, almost like a whisper, but layered, as if 100 voices were speaking at once. My skin crawled. "Gina," I said, my voice shaking, "what are you doing?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the hollow, wide and unblinking. The mirror in her hand trembled as if it were alive. The whispers grew louder, rising to a chorus of unintelligible sounds. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. The darkness inside the hollow shifted. It wasn't empty anymore. Something was there, watching us. I couldn't see its face, if it even had a face, but I felt its gaze, cold and probing. Matt took a step back, his bravado gone. "Okay, this is officially too much. Gina, stop whatever this is." But Gina didn't move. Her lips parted, and in a voice that wasn't hers, deeper, layered, like the whispers had merged into her, she said, "It's been waiting." The thing in the hollow reached out, or maybe the darkness itself reached. A tendril of shadow snaked toward Gina, wrapping around her wrist. She gasped, her eyes darting to us, panic breaking through whatever trance she'd been in. "Help me," she choked out. Matt and I lunged forward, grabbing her arms and pulling with everything we had. The tendril resisted, tightening, but we didn't let go. Finally, with a sound like tearing fabric, Gina fell backward into us, and the tendril snapped back into the hollow. The whispers returned, furious, rising to a crescendo before the darkness collapsed in on itself, leaving the hollow empty once more. We scrambled away from the tree, panting, Gina clutching her wrist where the shadow had touched her. It was marked, a faint, black spiral burned into her skin. "What the hell was that?" Matt demanded, his voice shaking. Gina didn't answer. She just stared at the tree, her face pale, her eyes haunted. "It's still there," she whispered. "It's always there." We packed up and left that night, none of us saying much. Gina didn't come back to Hollow Creek the next summer. Matt and I stopped hanging out by the tree. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the hollow and the thing inside it. And I swear, if I listen hard enough, I can still hear the whispers,